Buddy had returned to Owen Estate at the Cappy's request. The den seemed less closed off that day. It was unlike Chick to keep the door open when he was in, but that day it was ajar. He was standing with his back turned to him. He was observing the various other family heirlooms. You wanted to see me?" Buddy asked nervously. The Cappy turned. "The agents," he began. Buddy took a deep breath. "Oh, shit. I've had every agent from here to home fight tooth and nail to bring that compass back to me." Buddy sighed with relief. He had meant acquisitions agents. Buddy looked to the space that was supposed to be filled with the compass. "I guess sometimes no matter how hard you fight, you will always come to losses. And those losses can be great, but we carry on." He stopped. He narrowed his gaze on his son. "You all right, boy?" Buddy nodded. A sweat was beginning to break on his forehead. Yeah, losses and shit," Buddy repeated. The Cappy growled. "Are you on powder?" he asked. Buddy shook his head. Truthfully, he was sober. His current situation would be a whole lot easier if he weren't. "As I said, we all have our losses," the Cappy went on. "It's the prickly nature of the competition. We are ons, and we always succeed, even if it takes generations. This is what being a dynasty is all about. That spot on that wall there perhaps wasn't meant for something from our past. Maybe it stays open for the future, which brings me to you." But he clamped his mouth closed. "We've had our differences, and we've had our problems. I wasn't there for you as often as I should have been. I've been too focused on taking our family forward. I hoped you would follow my example, but I realize now an example can only be set if I was there for you. Times are changing. Times are going to get harder, and we need to stick together and be on our A-game. Can I trust you with that?" Buddy nodded. The Cappy came from behind his desk and approached him. Buddy flinched as he put his arm out, but Chick clasped his son with a grip behind his neck. "You're my boy, Buddy, and I'll do anything for you. The dynasty is carried forward, not backwards. Make me proud. Leave stories for our future generations to tell." Buddy sighed. "I'm sorry the dragon bitch smashed your compass." Chick's lips traced a smile. "As am I, son. As am I." But he couldn't think of what else to say. He asked, You okay?" Chick's smile spread. "I will be," he said. But he flinched again as the Cappy pulled him closer, but it was into an embrace with some warm pats on his back. "I love you, son." There were words Buddy had never heard from the Cappy before. Mama said it all the time, but she'd say it to anyone. The Cappy, on the other hand, he'd probably never uttered the words before. Come to think of it, Buddy had never said those words to anyone either. How does a bro respond to something like that? Luckily he didn't have to. The Cappy smiled again. "Besides, we still have the golden asset at the chapter house. I'm going to have to lean on the Fullens to make sure that site is cleared and returned to us." "Sure," Buddy agreed. "All right, go," he said, "and close the door behind you." Buddy pulled the den door closed. "The fuck was that all about?" he muttered to himself. There was an icy wind dancing across the Owen Estate. It was time for Betsy to breathe some air. She felt snug, like an enthusiastic lover against the Cappy's shoulder. Van Holder watched as Chick took aim. The target cracked at Betsy's bite. Van Holder applauded. "Good shot," he said. "Are you a marksman yourself?" he asked. Van Holder raised his chin and took a better look at the target. "Can't say I've used but I'm more of a hands-on man myself." Chick laughed. "That's why I like you. It's good to let your hands get dirty from time to time." Van Holder agreed. "I hear a lot of noise coming from our warehouses. I trust the investment is being put to good use." Van Holder's lips traced a smile. "Why don't you come and take a look?" The Cappy gave Betsy to an assistant to be taken back inside. The warmth of Betsy's body showed she was eager for more, but that would have to wait. The two made their way to a warehouse on the Kingsgate campus that Chick Owen had given for their purposes. When the warehouse doors were pulled open, he was not disappointed. Hundreds of Black Band appointees were busy building a weapon of the most destructive kind. It would be fatal where necessary and unstoppable. Attention was being paid to a large cowcatcher from an old locomotive. Thousands of pounds of power it held. There was not a wall in Colford that could hold it back. "Is this the weapon used in Camaro?" the Cappy asked. "It had to be brought in for parts. Assembly has taken time," Van Holder explained. The device that had been used to make a king in Sabala take to his knees and weep was but a prototype for what they had before them now. Charles Chick Owen was impressed. Van Holder was only too keen to display their success. "With your generosity, I will be able to make the upgrades. We need to tackle the current problem." The Black Bands continued to busy themselves with assembly. Both the Cappy and Van Holder looked at the weapon with admiration. She is mighty impressive, stated Chick Owen. She's called Game Changer, Van Holder explained. Chick grinned. I do believe it is time for the game to change. Dan had set up the projector in the Filton Press archive room. The old video played. It displayed shaky and grainy images of old Bellfield over the last century. It showed Brendan Mack as a young man when he took over. He was without his wheelchair then, standing tall and proud with his two elder sons, Paddy and Kieran. Paddy looked a lot like his father. What interested me the most was the Great Wars of the last century when the distillery gates had been last closed. Those walls were built to last. The distillery had originally been gasworks. The Great Wars brought about a ban on alcohol. There were riots and more violence as a result. Sean Mack, who worked for the gasworks at the time, used a small shed on the site to brew his own booze. When the owner of the gasworks discovered what he was doing, he was delighted. Soon Sean was brewing booze for the entire city. He brought his sons, Dara and Callum, in to help. On the grounds of the gasworks began Mack and Sons Distillery. The gates were closed to keep the authorities from ousting the booze runners. Stubborn and refusing to move, the distillery built itself around the gasworks, becoming the Bellfield monumental structure we know today. Generations passed, but those gates still stood strong. The bells started to ring. Brendan Mack and his brother Alan made their way to the gates. Alan was pushing Brendan's chair. The entrance created during the dry days of the last century previously discussed held the collection of bootleg booze was still there. Only one of their own would know of it. When Brendan and Alan arrived on the scene, Paddy and Kieran were being greeted by their workers. "Oh, the scoundrels return," they cheered. Paddy was being clapped proudly on the back by some of the workers. Kieran was busy retelling their tales of heroism to the workers when Paddy spotted their father. He went to meet him. He wrapped his arms around him and squeezed him tight. "You look good," said Brendan, holding back emotion. "Born this good looking is a curse," Kieran cheered, pushing Paddy aside to hug Brendan too. "We had to pull back," Paddy explained to the reigning Mac boss. "We were making our way around to the Cooper garages and Reginald Penn was determined to head back to Maine. We would have been cursed. I tried to warn him." "I heard what happened to Reggie," said Brendan. "It'd be hard not to do the same if it weren't my own. It leaves us vulnerable though. Did you find anything on Tawny?" he asked with a little hope. Paddy shook his head. "No," he admitted. "Sorry." Brendan sighed. "We'll have to give some thought to our next move, but the boys are raring to go." Paddy took over the pushing of Brendan's wheelchair. They passed through the distillery's main body. Cheers rang out when they saw Paddy home again. The tables had been turned and the distillery equipment was replaced with weaponry. When the distillery gates opened again, they would be ready. "We're at war, lads," Paddy called them as he pushed his father down the main aisle, flanked by Alan and Kieran. Cheers were the response. "Are you ready?" Paddy called. "I said, are you fucking ready?" The cheers grew louder. The spirit of the distillery was alive. It was boiling over. It was unaware of the danger that rumbled down the Love Street towards it. The Mac and Sons distillery was brought to ruin earlier today in a lawmaker-sanctioned raid as the terrorist group faced off with the Black Bands of Sabala. 43 Mac workers died in the attack as they tried to open fire on the Black Bands. Mac and Sons leader Brendan Mack was shot trying to take aim. It is believed that his sons Patrick and Kieran escaped and are now concealed somewhere within Bellfield. The distillery has been officially seized and the search for the fugitives continue. I'm Sandra Bake, Call for Daily News. With the help from the Bellfield natives, Paddy and Kieran had managed to escape the devastation at the distillery. They split just after Love Street. Paddy slipped into a house nearby. He took a deep breath. I should ask why you're breaking and entering, but given the noise from the distillery, the situation explains itself. I'm sorry, Mrs. Shepherd, Paddy replied boyishly, recognising no counsellor from the Bellfield community. I didn't want to bring any trouble to your door. And yet here you are, she replied. Sit, Patrick, but wake your feet first. I don't want you trailing my garden across the floor. Paddy obeyed as he took a seat at a small wooden kitchen table. Mrs. Shepherd began to brew tea. There's no use going anywhere now, she said. You might as well have a cup of tea and wait for things to blow over. I'm fine, he said. The old counsellor turned to him with a raised eyebrow. It's not optional. She made 2 cups of tea and brought them to the table. You've always been a troublesome one, Patrick, she said. But you're a good boy, really. Mrs. Shepherd had seen all the Macs grow up. As a counsellor, they had been both help and hindrance to her. She knew Tawny well too, having met her through Brendan. They had a shared interest in helping the community. As boys, Paddy and Kieran had spray-painted all over the Love Street Park. It was she who had marched the boys back and had them repaint it. That's what you get for being aged, Brendan had said when they returned covered in green paint. I'll wring their bloody necks, Annie Mac had promised. A promise delivered, at least on Kieran. Mrs. Shepherd had also been there to witness Paddy being prepared to take over the distillery. He was cheeky, but he had a lot of the Mac endurance. Mrs. Shepherd clutched the Albin's beads around her neck. They could both hear voices out in the street. They were shouting in Bellfield accents. Paddy hoped Kieran had managed to stay safe. He hoped those left at the distillery had survived at least. The table shuddered as an explosion rattled down Love Street. Mrs. Shepherd took a deep breath. She clutched her beads tighter. There was a bang on the door. Paddy stood. Mrs. Shepherd stood too. "Stay here," she said. She went to answer the door and Paddy crossed to the kitchen drawer. He removed a knife. He hid himself behind the kitchen counter and listened as Mrs. Shepherd answered to the caller. "Steve Kramer, CPD," he said. "This is Peter Finnegan. We're looking for Patrick and Kieran Mack. Have you seen them?" Mrs. Shepherd closed the door over slightly but slowly as to not be suspicious. "Haven't seen anything," she replied. "I had to turn off the television with all that noise down in the distillery." Finnegan looked at her. Mrs. Shepherd closed the door over a little more. "Can we come in and take a look around?" asked Steve. "Do you have a warrant to search my property?" she asked. She knew they didn't. "They've been authorized to use force if necessary, but we'd rather you cooperate," she was warned. "Instead of harassing all women and the Mag boys, you should do your job and go and check out the pervert down Daly Street who sells drugs to all the kiddies." Mrs. Shepherd's neighbour had come in and was leaning on her balcony. "It's fine, Josie," said Mrs. Shepherd. "They were just leaving." Steve and Finnegan stayed their ground. The neighbourhood didn't much appreciate the officers present. They were being skilled at. It was said among CPD and most of the greater Colford that Bellfield should be fenced off and allowed to police themselves. "I told you I haven't seen anyone. I do, however, believe that some of the young ones are unscrewing the wheels off your car," said Mrs. Shepherd. Steve looked back. "Oh, you little bastards!" he yelled. A group of kids aged around 8 scattered. The CPD officers charged towards the car. When they climbed inside, the young Bellfield fleet began to throw stones at them. The officers pursued them towards the Daly Street exit towards Colford City. Paddy was at Mrs. Shepherd's back. "Thank you," he said gratefully. "Get out of here, Patrick," she warned, but she smiled and hugged him. "Are you going to move your arse?" a voice called from across the street. Kieran waved his brother towards him. When Paddy joined Kieran, the boys antagonising the police came running back towards them. "They're away in their car," he announced proudly. "Good job there," Kieran said, patting the boy's shoulder. The three started to make their way briskly to the quieter part of Bellfield to regroup. The boys explained, "Me and my old fella are going to go down to the distillery. Let you know what's happening." "Thanks," said Paddy with a genuine gratitude. "Stay away from those fucking black bands. They're not like CPD." Love Street had fallen to silence for now, but it would hear a great noise again.